Hello YouTube, thank you that you're still listening to my podcast here on this platform. I will make sure to keep uploading it. I hope you all noticed the switch to the new channel. So in this episode I was talking with Vysuals. As I mentioned it in the last episode, there will be 2 episodes with Vysuals. This is the second one, the last one I've recorded with him. We talked about RNG and speedruns, and before you actually want to dive into this episode, think about what your perspective to RNG is. If you hate it, you like it, you find it good, and right at the end of this video, what you think about it then. Because I think a lot of people may change their point of view towards RNG. A lot of people may dislike RNG, may hate RNG. So give this episode a try. We talked a lot about good things when it comes down to RNG and speedruns, like how RNG and speedruns can be a really, really good thing. And we also talked a lot about the mental stress RNG puts on a human being. Like, we talked about both the good and the bad. So let that sink into you, and let's write down at the end of the video what you think about it. I think a lot of people may change their perspective here. So enjoy the video and see you at the end cut. Or better, hear you at the end cut. Hello everybody, welcome to another episode of Speedrun Education, where I talk again with Vysuals. If you are familiar with him, we talked already with him about HalloMatt, but today we talk about RNG. So Vysuals, let's actually start right away with what is RNG and what does it stand for in the speedrunning scene and in general. How would you answer that question?
RNG stands for random number generator. You can also just call it randomness or luck, or basically it's just a way to introduce artificial randomness into most of the time video games, but in a lot of different things. It's just, it can be anything from enemy patterns to enemy locations to item drops, etc., etc. Just a way of showing randomness in a video game.
Yeah. So when we think about speedrunning a game, we obviously want to play as perfect as possible through a game, and RNG and randomness can be a little problem to get to that point. Like, if the enemy is like giving you a bad pattern, or a boss fight is like giving you an unlucky pattern and kills you, then you just die to RNG. There's not that much you could do about that. So how do we deal in speedruns with RNG, and how does RNG affect HalloMatt, for example?
RNG is extremely prevalent in HalloMatt. It's such a massive part of it. You just eventually you just have to kind of embrace it. It's gonna happen. You're gonna get bad patterns. You're gonna get weird enemy locations. It's just you just have to embrace and understand that it's gonna happen. It doesn't just happen to you. It happens to everybody, especially in HalloMatt. And I mean, like, HalloMatt's so RNG, like you actually can't task it. You can't do a tool assisted speedrun of it because everything's RNG. There's no seeds. Like, even the dash distance is apparently random, from what I've been told. Like, yeah,
wow,
it's not 100% consistent at all.
That's not cool.
Yeah, but eventually you just kind of you just learn to deal with it, and it in a weird way, like, when you think about speedrunners, you would think about, must hate RNG, it must be the worst thing ever. But at the same time, I don't even think if you were to remove all the RNG from HalloMatt, I don't think it would be fun. I think half of the fun of HalloMatt in general and speedrunning is dealing with the RNG and how you learn to deal with it, how you adjust to it on the fly, and like when you see a bad pattern, how do you adjust to that? How do you find out how to do fast damage while dealing with weird patterns or whatever? So I think it gives. I think the point of RNG is to give games replay value, but I do think some games can go overboard with it. Like, for example, I think it's BioShock Infinite. There's an item you like absolutely have to drop. If you don't get it, like, there's no point in continuing the run. It loses like 1 billion years or something.
Okay.
Yeah, 1 billion years. And so what the community did was it has like a super low drop rate, something like 5 or 10% or whatever. So like they would just have, and I think it's like a pretty decent chunk into the run. So the community decided like it's not even worth running the game if we have to try to get this drop every time. So they just modded the game to where it drops 100% in the same chest every time, so that the skill is based on the rest of the run. And that's like an example of like RNG going too far. But I do think there's a healthy middle ground of like, if there's no RNG in a run, eventually, unless it has a really high skill ceiling, like Celeste, I think Celeste is a good example of no RNG done well, because the RNG comes from the human element of no one's ever going to be able to execute this perfectly. Maybe one day somebody will have like a 100% perfect run or whatever, but it's very unlikely that anybody will ever have like 30 minutes of perfect gameplay. So unless it has an extremely high skill ceiling like that, I think RNG can be a good thing to introduce a way of like making it to where the game will never be capped, if that makes sense. They'll never like have it solved. It'll never be done. And of course, like no speed game's ever really done, like as we've seen from Super Mario Bros. But I do I do think that like it can be done well when in small ways. And it is a skill. Like it is a skill of how you deal with the energy.
I totally love what you say, because that was one question I prepared for the like very end. If like, can you say something positive about RNG? And you just said it right away, because I also totally agree on that. Like, if a game has no RNG, that can be great, as you said. Celeste is still a like incredible, great speed game, but RNG, like you have to focus on movement, on like boss threats or enemy threats or whatever combat threats. But if you put in RNG to this, it's just another skill set you have to adapt to, like dealing with bad patterns with good patterns. You just said everything I want to hear from you, basically. That it's like another skill you need to learn. And like when TG8, for example, started, like that's the first time I realized that. When TG8 started to go from Celeste to Link's Awakening, he said, like in one of his first tweets on this game, he starts to understand that like that you have to learn, or you can learn RNG, learning how to deal with RNG and getting around like patterns, like seeing what happens when I enter the room in this way, how does the enemy respond to me then, and then you can see like what's the best optimal way. And I really really like what you said. So would you say generally that you can learn RNG, and how do you learn RNG? Like, what is a good example you can basically use about that topic to make it just clear?
I think RNG is almost like, it almost is your experience with the game is where it kind of shines, because once you do a room 1,000 times, you're most likely, unless it's some crazy game, you're most likely going to see every iteration of that room. You're going to see every enemy placement. You're going to see everything. If you did something very slightly different, how they reacted to it or whatever. So I think that whenever you have a lot of experience with the game and you run it for long enough, you start to understand like there's a room in Hollow Knight where it's introing where you enter the room and there's 3 guys and they can be randomly placed throughout, and you need to get a hit on each one of them, or 3 hits in total, but most times it's one from each. And I've run the category so much that as soon as I enter the room and I see how all 3 of them are placed, I immediately know, okay, I need to jump, then turn around, do a quick slash to the left to hit both, and then jump and pogo off the last one and dash immediately to get in between him and the ceiling. And so like, once you run it enough, you kind of understand, like, just from muscle memory of like, let me just pick from the 8 different combinations of things I need to do based on where they are. And I do think it almost becomes fun once you feel like there's nothing the game can throw at me that's going to throw me off. Like I can handle anything it gives me, and it's really cool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally. God, I guess you said it so well, and I faded so out by just listening to you that I totally forgot that I'm recording a podcast. So sorry, everybody. Okay, you mentioned like RNG, like you cannot test Hollow Knight because RNG is like so random that you cannot manipulate it in any way. Do you know something about RNG manipulation? Because some people might not know that in most speed games, you can actually manipulate some parts of the RNG. So can we talk a little bit about that, like RNG manipulation, what it's about and how it like works? From what you know and what I know, we can probably work out something that sounds well enough for this brief mention.
I know a little bit about RNG manipulation as far as like what I've seen from different YouTube videos, but basically, I guess the best I can do is to give examples of like Super Mario Bros. There's certain seeds of the game to where, let's say, it had 6 dice rolls, right? And if you started the game on 1 frame, you'll get a 6-5-2-4, right? On every single time. If you start on that exact frame, you'll always get 6-5-2-4 on those different RNG checks or whatever, and we'll call them dice rolls. And then if you start 1 frame later, then you'll always get like 2-1-2-4 or something like that. Like you'll always get that thing. And so RNG manipulation, as far as I know, is getting a way to control the RNG of certain sections of runs as best as you can. So for example, in Pokemon, where they need to catch a Nidoran in Pokemon Red, they can turn off the console and turn it back on and load it up in a certain way while holding the same buttons every time to where they'll always get a good Nidoran so they don't have to deal with the randomness and deal with the RNG. So it's just a way to control the RNG as well as you can to eliminate as much randomness that can be like crushing to runners or really inconvenient as best as you can. That's basically my RNG manipulation knowledge.
Yeah, I think, you said it already pretty well. I recently watched a video about like it's actually a completely different video. Like it was a Kaizo Mario ROM hack. Grand Puba was playing it, and there was like one level where every time he enters a door, he gets a different room, like out of 4 or 5. And then he explained that there's probably no real RNG in a game because it always relies on maybe your movement. Like if you move that certain way, you always get the same RNG, but no human being can move that perfectly to get always the same RNG. Or it relies on like global frames or the frames on the certain screen. It's all these things, and people, that's the crazy thing about speedrunning. I feel like people invest so much time to figure out things like that there is basically most RNG in a video game is not really hidden from us if there are people who are dedicated to it. Like, actually, I just go ahead because I recorded an episode with Dave Stereo, who's a Final Fantasy speedrunner, and he told me like a story that on a specific cutscene there are like sparks and laser beams like shooting out, and depending on how many sparks there are or laser beams there are, I don't really remember what exactly it was, but something like that. How many frames there are shooting these laser beams, they take the amount of frames, put it into a calculator, and then they know the RNG seed for a later part of the run. And how these two things are even connected is like absurd in the first place. If you don't get what I say, go listen to that episode, please.
That's awesome.
It's like so absurd to think about that, and that people figure it out is even more absurd. So it shows that like speedrunners have, if there's something to figure out, then they will figure it out. Like I can guarantee you this. Go ahead.
Actually, I love like finding out how they find out things like this. You know, like the with Super Mario Bros. 3, they found out how to get the Hammer Brothers to move certain ways on the menu or whatever. If you in the levels on certain frames.
Yeah.
I always find that so fascinating.
Yeah, that for that record, there are like great videos to explain like how certain things work in speedruns. If you're more interested in that, you go on YouTube, do a little bit of research. You will get so much knowledge about it, and you see so much dedication. It's just beautiful to watch, in my opinion. But back to the topic, we got a lot ahead of us. So you are a Hollow Knight speedrunner, and Hollow Knight is a very RNG reliant game. And at some point, the RNG rather determines if you get a world record or not, or a new PB or not. So how does it feel to have RNG deciding about your world record and how to deal with that? Or is it even fun to speedrun a game at that point? Like, you can probably explain it better than I can ask about it.
Yeah, I will say that I used to not be good at dealing with it. Like I used to let it get to me really hard, and I've said 100 times, like on streams, like there will be runs where if just one thing would have, let's use the dice example. If there's one part of the run, if I just wouldn't have got a 1, if I would have got any other outcome, like even on like a 20-sided die, if I just wouldn't have got a 1, then I would have been fine. But I just got the one bad result, and it hurts. It actually just really hurts. But you keep moving on, you keep trying. Like eventually the stars will align. And as a quick example, like I was grinding for Truening record recently, and at the time of this recording, and there was a run where in Truening is really RNG heavy. I mean, the whole game's RNG heavy, but Truening in particular, it just feels very unforgiving because the coin flips and the dice rolls that you have to get in order to even have a chance at world record sometimes feels like it's even possible to get all of them to line up. And there was a run I got 2 weeks ago or so where everything did line up. I got all the RNG I needed. I got everything I needed. And I got to the White Palace. And the White Palace is not RNG other than like the tiny bit of, Hollow Knight RNG. And I got to the White Palace and I was like, okay, as long as I can get through the White Palace, like there's going to be RNG at the later, the last 2 bosses of the game, but that's fine. Let me just get through the White Palace, still ahead. I was ahead of the world record. And I completely messed it up. It was just all me. I messed up like 3 different times and I got really upset. And when I finished the run, it was still a new PB, but I missed record by like 14 seconds. I lost 30 seconds on the White Palace.
Oh.
And I was like in tears. I was like, this wasn't the game. The game didn't screw me over. It didn't give me bad RNG. It finally gave me the stars aligning run that I needed, and I threw it away. And I felt like it hurt. Like, it hurt a lot. And it sucks to, you finally got the RNG, and then you throw it away. It's like, when am I ever going to get that again? Like, I didn't think I was ever, going to finally get an opportunity like that. It definitely can feel discouraging when the game just feels like there's been streams I've had, like in 106, for example, 106%. I think it's at the 16-ish minute mark. You have to go into Soul Sanctum, which is extremely RNG section of the run of the game in general. And there'll be some days where the game just feels evil. It just feels cruel. Like, I just can't get past that part of the run. I just want to get a run started, even if it's not even like that good. Like, it's a bad stream if I'm just doing the first 10 minutes of the run, 15 times.
True.
And people they'll start leaving, and I totally understand. Like, I don't want to watch that either. Like, if I was watching a stream, I don't want to watch somebody like reset over and over. But like, I just it just feels so soul crushing, and you just have to believe that like you'll get one started eventually. You just have to keep plugging away at it, and eventually like once you finally get that run started, you're like, okay, I got to capitalize here. I'm going to do it. Like, and it just, I don't know. You just have to push past it. It hurts, but what are you going to do? I think the good moments definitely make up for the moments that hurt.
Yeah. Like, we'll talk about that good moment thing a little bit later, but you just said one thing I find really interesting, because that entire RNG thing, I feel like what people underestimate the most, like people who are outside just watching speedruns underestimate the most, is it can be extremely pressuring, because like once you get the good RNG, like in the example you just told us, you probably felt extremely pressured through White Palace in some sense. Even though you played it like thousands of times, you still feel like, fuck, now I have the run. If I don't get it now, who knows when I will get it again. And like, let's talk about that mentality, like how much it can pressure you on the mentality and how stressful it can be in like both directions, in both the if you get like no good RNG and if you get like the perfect RNG, and the only person to blame is you from now on, and you then mess up. Let's talk about that, because I feel like we need to excel a little bit more on that.
Yeah, I feel like personally, I feel like I'm somebody that doesn't suffer from like feeling the pressure too much, or feeling like, a lot of anxiety whenever I'm like deep in a run or whatever. But even like I guess it'll kind of sound cocky, but even me, like even somebody who I don't think I feel that much pressure or whatever, even I like will succumb to it sometimes. When I was in that White Palace, I definitely felt it. It felt like this was the moment. This was the moment. I don't know when I'm going to get another one of these. I have to do it here. Mm-hmm. And as soon as I messed up once, like I messed up in the very beginning, and I was like, gotta shake it off. And I messed up another time, and I was like,
it's like a spiral that's never ending. It's so difficult to break out of that thing.
It snowballed so hard. Like once one thing went wrong, like you really just have to let it go. And I could say it, I probably did say, I don't remember exactly what I said, but I probably said something along the lines of, I gotta shake that off, I gotta let it go. But there's no way. It was still in the back of my mind. I was still thinking about it in every room, and then every mistake from there on just compounded and built on that, and it just exponentially grew in my mind until eventually I just crumbled and lost 30 seconds. And so I do think that like it's probably not like super like the best mindset you could have to like let it get to you that much, but I think it's just human. Like I don't know anybody that's like gonna completely be able to shake that off first try. Like it's gonna happen. You just have to like
get familiar with it, and then you understand how you can shake it off.
Sure.
I think what you just said totally shows that like speedrunning is not about like just practice or talent or however you want to call it. It's like also like a reasonable chunk of it is also like mental health, mentality, how you deal with like these things. Like what you just said is like so beautiful. Sometimes I speedrun Celeste and I feel like I'm on a good run, but I know there's one trick that I tend to mess up every now and then. it's like all of a sudden in my mind that I'm going to mess it up, or like I worry too much about it, and then I just play a lot more shakier because
the mess up, right?
Yeah, genau. Sorry, I just said this German word because I'm so used to it. Exactly what you're saying. Sometimes you just like so focused on something that you're not relaxed anymore. Like when you speedrun normally, when you're not on the best pace of the world, you're so much more relaxed, or when you practice it, and then it happens to be in a good run, and you're like, I need to get it now, and then you start to mess it up by all yourself. And another great example I feel I just want to add to this is when I watch Kaiser Mario ROM hack speedruns, they tend to say one thing that, like, they played the levels thousands of times, they have so much experience in Mario, they make it look easy, but they even, like, once they die in one level, it's like a death spiral, and they get out of this entire flow of the speedrun. You cannot escape from that sometimes. It's like extremely difficult. And I think that's like more of a consistency thing. Like people who are like very consistent with it and have a good mentality to it are really good at getting out of that. And that can like benefit, for example, in races where you don't have the chance to just reset. But even on PB attempts, it can be just like a crucial thing that if you're not prepared for it, how to get out of a bad flow, I want to say it. It's like, it can be the run killer because we are humans, we make mistakes every now and then, and if we make a mistake at the wrong time, we need to learn how to get back from it. And I think we just told it in a very perfect way, if I can say that. One thing I feel like many people might be wondering, because not everybody is at world record level, you know? There are like only a small amount of people who really have to worry about getting world record with good RNG. But how much can you think, or can you say RNG should or affects mid-level or beginner level? Because it obviously affects them too, but in a different way. So let's talk a little about that, because I feel like that's like also something that's interesting for people who start out with speedrunning, for example.
Yeah, I mean, I think it can affect every level, because I mean, let's say you're if you were to play perfectly, right, in 80% of Celeste, or well, I guess with RNG in HalloMatt, let's say your best that you could achieve with perfect gameplay and perfect RNG is like 45 minutes of 80%, and then those bad RNG moments will, you know, make you lose 10, 15, 20 seconds here and there, and all of a sudden you're up to 55 minutes or 50 minutes or whatever, and it's gonna feel honestly just as bad to you as me getting bad RNG to lose 5 seconds and missing out on a record. Like it's still relative to your skill level. It's going to feel just as bad to you as it does to me getting, like, you know, you losing a minute to dying to Watch Nights because of bad RNG is going to feel just as bad as me losing 10 seconds to bad RNG against Watch Nights. It's relative. Like, just because I'm losing a record to it doesn't mean that like your trouble RNG. Yeah, it doesn't mean any more for me. It's the same. I feel like I can definitely relate to somebody being like, oh, you know, my game skipped during the explosion pogo and I took 2 damage and died or something. Like, it's gonna be like, yeah, that sucks on every level. It doesn't matter where you are on the leaderboard. Like, it definitely sucks. So I definitely feel like it doesn't even matter where you are on the leaderboard. It's like, you're gonna have to learn to deal with RNG, and it's gonna suck. But you know, nothing you do about it. Just keep going.
Yeah, I feel like we talked. Yeah, oh, I don't know. That was really good. Yeah, RNG is like, it's just a thing you have to get over, and even though you dislike it, it's like part of the game, part of the, you know, run. And I think we need to talk more about how to actually deal with RNG, because that may maybe leave a little bit. So, like, how do you deal with, for example, with RNG? Like, you have big RNG parts in Hollow Knight, and you are aware of it, obviously. But how do you make sure that you don't stress yourself too much with like bad RNG patterns, for example? Like, how do you maintain, you know, composure throughout a stream, for example, or throughout the day, a week, whatever? Because you run into these bad weeks where you just like, you get no good run going for like several days eventually.
Yeah. I think part of it comes down to it, for me, I think it comes down to like making sure that when you get the good RNG, you take advantage. And I think that all boils down to your confidence level of like what you're doing. So like for example, let's say me personally, I've messed up explosion pogo in the past like week, probably like 5-6 times, and the 6 months before that I probably messed it up once. Like it's just something that I never thought about, I never messed it up, and then just lately for some reason I've just been messing it up. So now every time I'm on the way to explosion pogo, I think about, oh man, I've messed this up lately, let me see if I can do it right this time. And that, I think that's a bad mindset, because I think I'm wondering if I'm going to get it instead of knowing I can get it. Mm-hmm. And in my opinion, I think confidence is such a huge part of every video game, like competitive video game in existence, that I think that once you feel confident in what you're doing and you know you can do something, then I think you'll get it more often, in my personal experience. And in exchange, that means that when you get, in certain RNG situations, when you get the good one, if you know that you can capitalize when it gives it to you, then like it feels less bad, because the worst case scenario is you miss, like you get bad RNG, lose a run, get bad RNG, lose a run, then you get good RNG and you lose the run still, and you're like that feels the worst. That feels like it finally gave it to me. The game didn't screw me over, I screwed me over, and it, like that feels the worst. So as long as you're making sure that you're capitalizing it when it finally gives you what you need, then like I feel like it makes the bad RNG ones sting less, because you're like, that wasn't my fault. What could I have done? It feels better knowing that like at least I did what I could have done. I played to my best ability. The game just didn't give it to me. Just start up another one. It'll work out eventually, and like you just keep trying. Like one of the days the stars will align. And as long as you make sure that you're taking advantage of it when it does give you the good one, I think you'll be fine.
Yeah, I totally love what you said, that when you get good RNG and you didn't still lose it, that's like definitely the worst. Because like, yeah, you can only blame yourself, and that's like the worst, definitely. And also like what you just said, that if you like, when I speedrun Celeste, I have random parts of the run that I did since sometimes day one, all the same, because it's like that basic. And then at some point I just mess it up once, and ever since I mess it up like 4 or 5 times per week, because for whatever reason I know I can mess up there, and now my muscle memory is all gone. I feel unconfident about it, and like, yeah, it's so weird that things like this can randomly pop up, and then you are mentally so screwed there. You just need to get the mindset back that you can still do it. Nothing has changed, but it's so difficult. I really like that. We excel so much on speedrunning is such a mindset thing too. Not only like, oh, I played it thousands of times, I can do it like every time. No, you cannot, because
none of it's set in stone. It kind of feels like whack-a-mole. Like you nailed that trick, now you work on something else, and that one pops back up, and you're like, I just fixed that, and like then all of a sudden it's a problem again. And then when you're on your way to that part of the run, you're thinking about it. You're like, oh man, I'm gonna make sure I don't mess it up this time. Then you mess it up, and you're like, it's the worst.
And even if you like practice it, and in practice it went all well, it still like shows up in your mind during the run. And I want to say one thing, but I totally forgot it. Oh yeah, it might mean your mindset is not always perfect every day. Like at some day you may be stressed from work or school, and you just want to cool off in your stream or in your speedrun. But there's still like, it's not our mind is so complex. You can never like predict anything. Like there are random parts that even happen in our mind. Like at some point we just think randomly about one thing, and then we focus less on the run. It's like, yeah. Okay, I've ran out of actually ideas for this episode. I thought we were good, but we are not. So let's just add one thing to the final, so we can conclude it here without, trying to get any more out of it. Because I think we talked about like many good things. Is like, if there's like one more thing we wanted to say about like RNG, how to deal with it, what's like good or bad about it. Like if we can conclude RNG in one sentence, to explain it once and for all for people, and what are the good and bad things in it, then let's do it now, so we have a good conclusion to this episode. Yeah,
I think if you want to think about RNG in speedrunning, you can kind of think of it as like a spice. If you're making a dish, if you're cooking, and it has too much of the spice, it can ruin it. But if it has none, it sucks. Like it has to have that healthy middle ground of like just enough to make it just a little bit different, because if you have a bland dish, like, and with no RNG, like I said, there are exceptions like in Celeste. I think Celeste is great without RNG, but most of the time in a lot of games, like, it's just going to feel bland. It's going to feel like eventually somebody just got the perfect run with the perfect execution, and then where do you go from there? Like, now you're fighting in a 20-minute game for frames. Like, that's, no one wants to do that. But if it's too much RNG, and don't get me wrong, some people love a ton of spice. They love their food drowned in spice. You know, people that run like Mario Party, for example, they love it. But
that is such a good comparison. I love that.
but I think once you have that healthy middle ground of just enough to make it to where people have to react to it, it becomes, like I said earlier, a skill. It definitely, like, some of the best Hollow Knight runners are not just the best at, like, doing the stuff every time. They're good at adjusting on the fly. They're good at, okay, that went wrong, like, you know, very time slowed down way. Like, that went wrong like half a second ago. How do I react to that? How do I fix this? How do I get back on track, get back in rhythm? So I think ultimately I'm glad RNG is a thing. I'm glad it's in runs, and I think it makes for way more interesting speedruns, because if you have nothing, then, like, it just, I don't know, it's not. It makes the game have to skill test you in other ways, which is totally possible. But a lot of times it comes down to, like, I would rather see people adjust to the RNG and have to use that skill, because I think it's interesting.
Yeah, it's actually cool because you just mentioned one thing that reminds me of what I want to say in that episode just at the end. Because yeah, adjusting to the fly is, like, definitely, in my opinion, like, one of the coolest things like speedrunners can learn or can utilize on. It's, like, so cool. And because of that, there's one thing in the speedrun scene I really, really love, and that's randomizers, because they like shake up a game in a way that's like a different game, I want to say. Like, let's talk about Zelda randomizers, or even Hollow Knight randomizers. It's basically, when I play these things, it feels for me I play a roguelike of my favorite game in my favorite game universe. And I still have to, learn certain rules. Like, when I have this item, I can walk over there, and, I still have to adapt on the fly. So when I get these two item combinations, what can I do with that? Should I risk going to that area, or should I go the safe way and go to the another area, which is closer and have more items or whatever? And it's like, that's why I love randomizers, because everybody can utilize their own playstyle, and, but you can still, like, compete very well with and human, for example. Like, randomizer races, everybody plays different, but at the end, the people who, like, have the most consistent strats and also the skill in the game are the ones who come out at the top. And that's, like, you just said adapting on the fly, and in my mind immediately popped in randomizers, why I do love randomizers. So eventually we'll have an episode in the future with another guest, or maybe with you, I don't know, about randomizers, because randomizers are a beautiful, beautiful thing in speedrunning. I feel like it's like, it definitely revolutionized the speedrun scene, like, because they are not that long of a thing. Like, the first randomizer that really was big was A Link to the Past, and ever since, like, this speedrunning scene is so full of randomizers, it's incredible. Like, yeah, thank you for reminding me of that.
Oh, no problem. Randomizers is one of those things that I definitely love watching. I think randomizers are super interesting. I don't do them that much, just because, like I said, I get really tunnel vision on my goals, and, like, I feel like if I'm going to be playing a game, I want to be trying to reach one of those goals. And if I were to have everything accomplished, maybe I'd have time to, like, do other stuff. But I've never accomplished everything. But and so, like, I don't do a lot of randomizers, but I think they're super interesting. Like the Andy and Oats and Goats one, where Super Metroid, that was so interesting to me. I could watch that 100 times. And so I would kill for a Hollow Knight and Ori combo randomizer.
Oh, that sounds
would be
so
the coolest
cool.
thing in the.
That sounds so cool. Because I know the Ori randomizer is somewhat big, and, like, Hollow Knight has also a randomizer, but it's not that utilized. Combining these two things sounds like very beautiful. Maybe we could get that one day with, if eventually Silksong, like, whenever Silksong is getting released.
Silksong and Will of the Wisp, man, that'd be so sick.
Yeah. Okay, I think we talked about a little bit of different RNG at the end, but I think it was a beautiful episode. So thank you all for listening, and thank you Vysuals for talking with us about RNG, and I hope you like to talk about randomizers at the very end of it. So I forgot to mention that in the other episode we just recorded, but please make sure to follow Vysuals on both Twitter, Twitch, and do you have a YouTube? You do have a YouTube where you upload your PBs. Go follow him on that. I will link that on the podcast episode and on the YouTube video. So check that out. And thank you, Vysuals, for being here. It was totally awesome to talk with you an hour or something. We've talked now. So thank you for being here. And yeah, thank you all for listening, and see you soon. Bye.
Bye.
Do you remember what I asked you in the beginning? I really want to know if this episode had an impact on you. So please let me know in the comments what you think about RNG now and if your point of view changed, because I seriously think a lot of people hated on RNG. I always hear bad things about RNG when it comes down to speedrun topics. So today I want to see if some of you may change their point of view towards RNG. I generally feel like RNG is a good thing in so many ways. Yeah, it can be the most frustrating thing, but without RNG, most speedruns wouldn't be the same. So that's a good thing about it, to be honest. So I really hope you liked this episode. I think it was one of the better episodes I ever have recorded, so I slowly get the hang of this YouTube or of this podcast thing, better said. So I hope you liked this episode. Make sure to also check out my main YouTube channel. There I will upload a lot more videos about similar topics, so if you like this, you will also like my YouTube channel. There will be a lot of educative, informative speedrun content there, so check out my main YouTube channel, first link in the description. See you there, hopefully, or in one of my streams. All the links are in the description. You know how YouTube works. Bye, and see you hopefully in the next episode.